Welcome to our latest edition of Ronde and Tiki Barber on SuperBook Sports. It's just so odd saying your name first, but since you're in the Hall of Fame these days, I guess I owe you due respect. How you doing, brother?
It sounds odd that you put on a radio voice to talk to your brother on SuperBook Sports. That's all good. I'm cool with that, man. We can just, keep it casual, like we were in a womb and I just kicked you out, or you kicked me out, and I walked out sitting there waiting for you, like, when are you coming, man? Just Jesus, be real with me, bro. Let's talk some football, man.
I can't help it, man. I can't help it. I just want to do for a living. You know this, WFAN weekdays in New York, 2 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Shameless plug. But, Ronnie, look, this NFL season is not yet underway. We had the preseason games a couple weeks ago, and it really puts some focus on college football of all things. We don't watch it a ton, especially because I'm not calling games anymore in college football. UVA stinks, getting blown out by Tennessee, a game that you were at. But the biggest story in the football world is actually college football right now. And that's Deion Sanders at University of Colorado, where they didn't beat up, but they kind of put they laid some beat downs at times on TCU, who may be paper champions, but the Deion effect in Colorado. Are you shocked by this? Because I thought it was going to take some time.
Well, I'd say there's a couple of big stories in college football, and I'm not going to even talk about Clemson getting beat by Duke, who hasn't beaten a top 10 team in 34 years. That shine is gone. You can talk about realignment, college football. There's tons to talk about, but no story is bigger than Colorado Buffaloes and Deion. And the effect, the Deion effect, dude, I think it's for real. And I think it's here to stay, to be honest with you. Look, there's not really an avenue for ex-players to get into coaching the way that he did it. High school coach, goes to Jackson State and HBCU. And then because of his hype, right? He's the hypiest person on the planet in the history of sport. He gets this opportunity to go to Colorado, and nobody has expectations for him. And before we go there, TCU was ranked where they were because of showing up in the national championship game last year, where they got beat handily. They lose a quarterback, they lose a wide receiver, they lose about 4 other top players on this team. So I don't know that they were necessarily the 12th ranked team in the country, or wherever they were ranked going into that game. But the reality is, a team that nobody thought was going to be this good is that good.
Yeah, and this is Deion, and it's a cult of personality of Deion, because, and I don't think it's replicable, to be honest with you, because when I think about other athletes that are coaching, like our buddy Eddie George, he's at Tennessee State. They got their doors blown off by Notre Dame when they went up there. It wasn't even competitive. I think they scored 3 points in that game. It's just really hard to influence a young athlete's mind if you don't have that personality and without the coaching experience. Now, Deion did it in college. He did it in high school previously, but this is now Power 5 football. And he's done it by hiring good coaches around him, but also recruiting like crazy, right? Travis Henry, who was the #1 recruit. In fact, when he was coming out of high school, Travis Hunter, when he was coming out of high school 3 years ago, was the DB #1, CB #1, cornerback #1, and wide receiver #1. And he chose Jackson State. Now, you ask yourself, why? It's not because he wanted to go to an HBCU. Obviously, he wants to get to the league, but it was because of Deion Sanders. Now, maybe the NILs and how they're rewarding some of these kids, maybe that had something to do with it. But it was Deion who pulled the #1 overall recruit in high school football to Jackson State, and he followed him obviously to Colorado. And he did something, Ronde, that I don't know if is replicable. Like, there's been two-way stars before in college football. Champ Bailey was one. Charles Woodson was another, the only defensive player to ever win the Heisman. There's been a few here and there, but they're like intermittent offensive players. They're really defensive players, and then they're intermittently offensive. This dude played every damn snap. Like, that's not replicable. Nobody else can do that. Right. How much is that sustainable in your mind? You were a two-way guy in high school. Obviously, you didn't do it in college. Very few do. Is that sustainable? And no, because I don't think without that they're the same team.
No, I don't think so. That Travis Hunter cannot do that week in and week out. I'd love to see him try, because if you watch that game, he was the most entertaining player on the field. And the fact that you knew he was a DB playing receiver, or receiver playing DB, however you want to classify this dude, watching him perform was pretty outstanding. Sanders, the quarterback, was good. And I think you start there with this team, because the quarterback made him. He threw him. He had 11 catches. It's not like he was an augmented
guy.
Like, he was the offense for Colorado. And granted, they played well. And is Deion a good coach? I don't have any idea. I know he's a great motivator and a great hype person, but he has good coaches around him that know how to utilize their talent. And for one game, they were the story of college football. I don't know that they'll continue to be the story of college football. They have
Why are you hating on Deion, man?
I'm not hating on him. I'm just saying they got a tough road. And and we're speaking specifically about Travis Hunter here. If he's able to do this week in and week out, then he's the best player in the history of college football.
That's a good point.
History of college football. I don't see how he can do it. It's never been done before. Maybe back in the 40s and 50s when this was commonplace. But in today's game, I don't see him being able to do that. And I'm sure he'll be taking receipts off people who say he can't do this. But I just think it's incredibly hard. And play 120 snaps, 12 weeks in a row, man, he's different if he is.
Yeah, he is. And Deion talked about getting him a hot tub, and he's ready to go. He can do it all anytime he wants. Now, the Pac-12 is falling apart, right? Every team is jettisoning it. USC's leaving. UCLA is leaving. Stanford's joining the ACC. It's all over the place. But for this season, 2023, the Pac-12 is still pretty loaded, right? USC is sitting at the top, and Caleb Williams had a huge day, and Lincoln Riley's telling him he's got to play better after 122 points or whatever they scored in the first two games. The Colorado Buffaloes play the Nebraska Cornhuskers next. It's an interesting game because I haven't seen the latest odds. Maybe we can go find those, but I think Nebraska actually has the edge odds wise, at least from the public side of this thing. And Colorado, who's hosting their first home game after all that transpired against TCU, it's really a proof-it game for them. Can you sustain what you did against TCU against a Big Ten opponent and Nebraska? Now, they have a transfer quarterback over there. He was at Georgia Tech, Jeff Sims. He's a Georgia Tech. He's a dual threat guy. He's not a high completion percentage guy, but he's their leading rusher after the first couple of weeks, and the leading passer, obviously. Colorado against Nebraska, is this the big test, or are we waiting until they start playing in conference football before we really determine whether Deion is for real and this Colorado Buffaloes team is for real? I think
we watch it this week, and this will be probably one of the most watched games in college football this week. I will find that line because I'm actually interested in it now. Is Nebraska different under Matt Rule than they were under Scott Frost previous years? Yeah, they're more competitive. Obviously, you can tell just by week one. But the reality is, I don't know that the test is coming until they play USC or even Arizona and Arizona State, who won in week one. Those are the games that are gonna matter. Oregon, who won last week. I'm telling you, TCU wasn't a surprise win for me for Colorado. But we're gonna all watch Colorado for the next couple of weeks. I mean, there's no way you can't. The ability for Deion, because so many people talked about it going into the season, and then expecting them to, maybe have a good showing and lose, but then come out and win, and in the manner in which they did it.
Yep,
it's impossible not to watch them now, and we'll all will. And hopefully they back it up. I hope they back it up and beat Nebraska, and then the train will start really rolling.
Then the real hype gets on it. By the way, Nebraska is the underdog in this game. Colorado is favored by 3.5. They're at home, so I guess that's kind of like a draw. But the matchup predictor, this is people who are speculating. The analysts are saying 58% Nebraska, 41% to Colorado. But that is definitely one to watch. We will keep an eye on it, because if this Deion thing is for real, and he makes Colorado, who, by the way, were terrible last year, won one game last year, if he makes them into
football,
unbelievable. They were so bad it was unwatchable. If he makes them a winner in a year with 51 transfers, how
Right.
soon until he starts heading towards the NFL? I don't know. But do you see him as an NFL coach real quickly?
I mean, why not? Everybody gets opportunities. And my one caveat is I don't know that he's a position coach. What does he come in and he look, Herm Edwards was my position coach in Tampa. And I wouldn't say he was my best position coach, but he was a pretty good head coach when he went to the Jets. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
I mean,
it can work.
but the difference is, and you said it earlier, college football is about recruiting. It's about hyping kids up and bringing them into your program and then putting them on a better path. I don't know if it even serves Deion to be an NFL head coach, to be honest
Might
with you.
not. It might
I
not.
think he's in his best spot right now. He's got his son, Shedeur the Shredder Sanders, playing really good football. Like I didn't know what to expect from him, by the way, because he played. I didn't watch JSU last year.
Yeah, I didn't either. It was hard to watch them. You couldn't find them.
But he's technically and I mean technically, as in mechanics wise, a really good player. Like he looked like a possible draft pick. And I was not expecting that.
That's unbelievable. They might have 2 draft picks, maybe in the top 3 or so rounds, just because of Deion Sanders. Man, it's going to be interesting watching them all season. There is no doubt they are must-watch football. And if you don't follow Deion on social media, that dude's inspirational, man. You gotta follow Deion. And if you're interested in putting a little wager on it, go to SuperBook Sports, because SuperBook has all of the lines in college football around the country. Why would you bet on the big boys this football season? You wouldn't. Instead, try your hand with the local book, SuperBook Sports, this fall. SuperBook Sports is the book next door. Just a dedicated team of the best odds makers in Las Vegas, making sure you get the best prices and parlays anywhere. And now SuperBook will give you a bonus of up to $250 when you sign up and wager in the same day. Use the promo code Ronde or Tiki. What happens if you do Ronde and Tiki?
Ooh,
that's interesting. That's an interesting double. So bet with the best and use promo code Ronde or Tiki this football season with SuperBook Sports. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. We'll be right back.
What's up, y'all? It's Ronde and Tiki presented by SuperBook. Welcome back to segment 2. And guess what, Tiki? We get to talk about NFL football. I like to say PS, preseason 1, 2, 3 are back, and they are likely non-consequential for week 1 of NFL season. By the way, Tiki is doing Tampa at Minnesota with Matt Ryan this week. So tune into that on CBS if you so choose. I will be. And the biggest game of the week, though, it's the first game of the week. Even though it's probably not what people are expecting to be a good game.
Yeah.
Detroit at Kansas City, Tiki, is going to have everybody in football locked in. Talk about hype. We just finished our last segment talking about hype. I don't know that there's a more hyped team than Detroit right now.
I know. It's funny because you were saying that. Everybody's probably thinking he's going to say the Kansas City Chiefs, the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, who have been to 5 consecutive AFC championship games, hosting it in Arrowhead Stadium. That Chiefs team is so underhyped. I mean, they might be a sleeper. Nobody's talking about them.
I think people just figure that they're going to be there regardless at this point. I mean, They lose X number of players. It's not even worth going through the players on offense that they have lost. And you got Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Kadarius Toney. You're cast off from New York, and second year man Sky Moore as Mahomes' biggest targets, right? And you're saying it doesn't matter. They're still going to be there in the end
because they have Patrick Mahomes and they have Travis Kelce. That's what it comes down to. But really, this story is who you were talking about, Ronde. Detroit Lions. Like, the Detroit Lions came out of nowhere. I mean, it looked like they were going to finish the season, 3-14 a year ago. Yet they were terrible. And then they found a way to fight their way back. and almost make the playoffs, and in the process knock the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers out of the playoffs in his last game, obviously in Green Bay. Now he's here in New York, and we've talked about that a lot. But Detroit has something that you can't like put your finger on, because you're not going to go look at the talent and say, oh, well, they got, Josh Reynolds is a star, and Marvin Jones Jr., he's a superstar. Now I'm on Ron St. Brown. He's been fantastic for a late round pick, a fourth rounder, I believe, a couple of years ago. He has far exceeded the expectations set for him. But Jared Goff was a cast off. The Los Angeles Rams got rid of him because he couldn't win them a Super Bowl, and then they turn around and win a Super Bowl with when they traded for him. So who's Jared Goff? Yeah, with Matt Stafford. So, but who is Jared Goff? Like, you look at this team and you say, man, they don't have the talent to be good enough. But you know what they have? They have a coach in Dan Campbell who is so old school and so real. Right? Very rarely do you have a guy step into a head coaching role who was just built for it. I mean, he could have coached in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s. He could he could coach in 2050 because of how he is and how he motivates and gets tight with his players. I mean, you listen to him on Hard Knocks a year ago, or if you just follow with the Detroit Lions, he's talking about, I love you guys, right? And he means it, right? He's saying it in a way that the guys believe him. It's not an act. And when you have that as a coach, you get complete buy-in from your players, and as a result, you end up pushing above your weight. Like, guys who shouldn't be performing at the levels that they're playing at are pushing above their weight because they have so much belief in the head coach. The other thing that helps is his staff is full of former players, like guys who actually did it. Aaron Glenn is their defensive coordinator, and Deuce Staley was there. He's now in Carolina, but he's Mark Brunell is there. Like, he's done such an amazing job of putting let's call them former NFL influencers in his locker room, that it allows those guys that are doing it now to get real-time advice. It's not like theoretical. This is how you do it, because this is how I did it. I wonder if that's a model going forward, because you don't see a ton of former players becoming position coaches, but it's starting to happen with Dan Campbell's staff.
Players should be coaches, if you ask me. Not me, because I just can't, deal with the pressure of coaching young, unimpressive minds that just don't want to listen to you. But some people are made for it. Aaron Glenn in Detroit struggled last year. The defense, even though they, finished 9-8 at the end of the year, their defense was not very good. Did they get better? Yes, but they were not very good. But the reality of the Detroit Lions team is that they scored 27 points per game last year, somewhere around that, right? They were fast starters. I think they scored the most points in the NFL in the first quarter last year. So what does that tell you? Their defense was always a problem. They were always going to score points, right? But because of whether you call it the height or because they're actually pretty talented on offense, I mean, in fact, I think they might have the best offensive line in football. With a quarterback who I think the NFL feels collectively about Jared Goff. I don't love him, but I would definitely date him. And I think everybody feels that way about him, because he's good enough to win you football games, and with the talent he has around him, he's gonna be successful again. I mean, you have David Montgomery, you go draft Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round at running back. Like, there's nothing that should hold them back, other than the fact that people's perception of them are that they're the Detroit Lions. They do need to get better on defense. That being said, they are plus 140 to win the NFC North. This is a perfect year for Detroit to take that step out of the doldrums of the NFL, which I think they probably did towards the end of last year.
Yeah, I mean, they were 9-8. They had a plus 500 record, and nobody would have expected that.
Right. Well, but they started 1-6, and so when you start 1-6, the chances of you making the playoffs are, minuscule. That they were able to get there puts them in a better position in 2023 to perhaps win an NFC North title versus three other teams that also have huge question marks. But as it pertains to this game on Thursday night, Kansas City's 6.5 at home, which I think you would expect. If you're asking me, this is one of those games where I might take Detroit. Just because they have so much belief in themselves that this one could get a little out of control
Well,
for
I mean,
Kansas City if they start slow. Because
yes,
Detroit starts so fast,
that's right.
always.
And Kansas City struggled with that a couple of times a year ago, where they just got off to slow starts, and you're just scratching your head like, who is this team? Now, obviously, they found themselves and they got right as the season went on, and ultimately won the title. But Kansas City is vulnerable, and in fact, because they're having some issues with Frank Clark, a defensive tackle who is not in camp, likely is not going to be there until midway through the season. Now, that will someone replace him? Yeah, of course. Like, somebody's going to, Derek Nandi, whoever it is, somebody's going to step up and be the guy in his place.
They drafted a kid out of Kansas State who's a really good player.
Yes,
Felix Ndike Uzama, good player.
Exactly. So there's guys there, but the principle of not having your star defensive player sometimes has an effect on you, right? And it's almost like, okay, he's done so much, but he's not taking care of us. You're not taking care of him. What does that mean for all the rest of us? That's the danger in Kansas City. Now, the way you mitigate that, and the way that the Kansas City Chiefs just go out and look exactly like they did at the end of last year, is if Pat Mahomes is on point. If Pat Mahomes is not making mistakes, if Pat Mahomes is not trying to force things downfield to make big plays and kind of dinking and dunking like he did a lot of last year. As crazy as it sounds, he didn't have a ton of humongous plays. In fact, I think the average length of his touchdown last year was like 4.5 yards. Like, he didn't have these explosive plays that we saw with Tyreek Hill a year ago. A lot of it was put on the running back, Isaiah Pacheco, the kid from Rutgers, and who's now in his second year. So there are ways for this Kansas City Chiefs team to mitigate some of the issues and the lack of hype that's around this team, but it all depends on Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes is supposed to be the best player in football. He's the face of the NFL in so many ways right now. In order for him to pull this team, as crazy as that sounds, out of the, I don't know, this I don't want to say it's a hole, but it's just it feels like there's just a void that they're sitting in. Like, nobody's talking about them. Nobody's giving them the respect and the due that they deserve. It will happen on Thursday night if Pat Mahomes is Pat Mahomes.
Right. Look, they have Andy Reid, head coach. Matt Nagy's back as offensive coordinator, and they have the best quarterback that we've ever seen. And
he'll be fine. The Detroit Lions, it'll be interesting to see how they hang. 6.5. It's an interesting number because you almost feel like if you would just look at this, if you'd looked at this a year ago, you say this should be it should be 14. It should be double digits.
Right. At least 2 scores.
The fact that it's under a touchdown tells you the respect that Dan Campbell and the culture change that Dan Campbell has imparted upon this team. It's undeniable how impactful of a coach Dan Campbell has been in just a year. He's been amazing.
All right, quit blowing Dan Campbell. Let's go.
I love that dude too, by the way. We're changing the game. Help your bet stay hot this fall at SuperBook Sports, the most trusted name in sports gambling, with a direct line to Las Vegas. And now, when you use promo code Ronde or Tiki, you score up to $250 with their first bet bonus. Win or lose, SuperBook will match your first bet up to $250 with promo code Ronde or Tiki. Download the SuperBook Sports app in Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Nevada, Ohio, Tennessee, New Jersey, and Maryland. Enter the promo code Ronde or Tiki. Might have to get Ronde and Tiki in there as well, just to see how people like that.
Soon to be coming to Virginia as well.
That's correct, our home state. And you'll get $250 courtesy of SuperBook Sports. And by the way, if you want to go visit a great sports city, guess where it is right now? It's Las Vegas. Las Vegas. The Raiders are out there. If you're going to go on a trip, go to Las Vegas. And by the way, the hockey team's pretty good too. While you're out there, go check out the Westgate. That's the home of the SuperBook. It's got a ton of cool stuff in there, and it's the biggest one in the country. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. You got a gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Welcome back to Ronde and Tiki on SuperBook Sports. I'm Tiki Barber. That's Ronde Barber. Ronde, there are 5 new coaches in the NFL this year. And look, sometimes you can say these young coaches, they got great minds. They're going to do great things. Look at what Brian Dable did last year with the Giants. He was coach of the year. Look at what, Matt LaFleur in Green Bay, I think 13-3, three years in a row. Kyle Shanahan was awesome. Sean McVay was amazing. I don't know if it's going to be the case with three of these new coaches, especially the rookie ones, and D'Amico Ryans, who's down in Houston, Shane Steichen, who's in Indianapolis, and Jonathan Gannon, who's in Arizona. Those are, let's call them less than ideal situations, right?
Let's call them what they are. Shit shows.
Yes, exactly. So it is anybody's guess what's going to happen in those three cities. But the two other new head coaches are not retreads, but they are experienced head coaches. Frank Reich in Carolina, and I think most interestingly, Sean Payton up in Denver. Now, I have no expectation for the rookies in their seasons as head coaches because so many things can go wrong. You still got to establish a culture. Who knows if they're even the right coach? But this situation in Denver is really the most interesting one, mainly because we know how good their defense has historically been and even was last year. But I think more importantly, what happened with Russell Wilson, and can Sean Payton fix him? I think there is a lot of moving parts that needed to be corrected. He needed to get rid of the office. He needed to be more engaged with his team. And he needs a coach who can get the best out of him. Do you see Russell salvaging himself this season?
Well, put it this way. I think Russell's moniker, the one that imposed that he put on himself, was "Let Russ cook." I think the moniker this year is going to be "Is Russ cooked?" Because look, he's always teetered on that guy that was trying to do too much, right? He got away with it in Seattle. He took a lot of sacks. That's the one thing that always surprised me when I go watch film or do those games when I was working them. How many sacks did he took? And he couldn't ever find on-time rhythm, right? And it showed last year in Denver how terrible those tendencies played out. Now, Hackett took the bullet for this, right? But
yes,
a great quarterback would have salvaged that situation, and Russell Wilson wasn't able to. And so it gives me pause this year. Now, we know one thing about Sean, right? You know, because you were with him.
Yep.
He will absolutely not put up with the improvisation that defined Russell Wilson last year and those early years in his career. Because I asked this question. I played against Sean many years when he was in New Orleans. I was in Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
Drew Brees was his quarterback. Who made whom in New Orleans? It's a great question because was it Sean making Drew or was it Drew making Sean? Now, that question will be answered this year because obviously Russ is talented, right? We know he's been one of the best quarterbacks prior years, discounting last year, years, and he's probably even got a little bit more arm talent than Drew Brees did in his prime. So was it Drew being meticulous and that offense being catered specifically to him that made them successful? And if so, can Sean do that with Russell Wilson? Now, I can't wait to see because I think Sean is one of the greatest minds. I mean, just preparing for him. I remember preparing for him back in the day and not being able to figure out how to beat him. Like, because he had answers for everything that you did. He just needed a quarterback to execute it. And he had that. A guy, Drew Brees, who executed it meticulously, perfectly, almost every single game. His mistakes were, you made a great play, right? That's how you beat Drew Brees. You had to make great plays. Russ wasn't able to do that last year. And if he's able to do it this year, then it's Sean.
Yeah, right? I think it will be Sean. But the other thing that you have to take into account here, and this is the only thing I worry about with the Denver Broncos, because their defense was really good, top 10 in yards year ago. Like they did what they were supposed to do. The offense was just a mess. Sean Payton has always relied, and I know this personally, on running backs to be somewhat of a difference maker. This is whether it's misdirection or whether it's using him as a receiver out of the backfield. Think of Alvin Kamara down in New Orleans all those years, and this duo. Reggie Bush, like the two-headed monsters.
There's so many.
There's a lot of them that made those teams as good as they were. Obviously, it was Drew Brees as well, throwing for 5,000 yards. Does Russell Wilson have that with Javonte Williams, who's coming off an ACL, and Samaje Perine, who's a good player, but I don't know if he's a dynamic, great player. So the questions surrounding this Denver Bronco team about Russell Wilson, while they depend on Russell getting right and being a better teammate, let's call it what it is, it's also about this offense having the right pieces. So we may not see this immediately. Like, we may not see the success that Sean Payton should bring immediately, but I do think in time it will come. It might not be 2023, but Sean Payton will make this team a success in 2024. The question is going to be, is Russell Wilson still going to be a part of that conversation? That I don't know. Now, Frank Reich down in the Carolina Panthers, he's got a tough situation and sitting in front of him, mainly because he's got a rookie quarterback. Now, Bryce Young is a great young kid. Like, he is a good leader. He can make all the throws. He is so calm in the pocket. He doesn't get flustered, but sometimes that's what forces young quarterbacks into trouble, because they don't feel the pressure. I think of Daniel Jones when he was in New York as a first year player. Same thing. Smart, big, calm demeanor, taking his time, sack fumbles, and he's going to get hit a lot. I think Bryce Young. Can Frank Reich figure that out? That's to be determined. But because the NFC South is so, let's call it what it is, wide open, I have no idea what to expect. There is somewhat of a chance that he might figure this thing out down in, if Bryce Young can get right away.
Of these two veteran coaches, as if you want to call them, that are retreading into new situations, this one's I think least likely for success, only because Frank Reich is dealing with a rookie quarterback. And I don't know, watching preseason this year, that Bryce is 100% ready to deal with what's going to happen to him in the NFL. And I mean that in the sense that he is going to get hit a lot because their offensive line is not very good. He got hit a bunch in preseason football. Which quarterback do you know that gets hit a lot in preseason quarterback? They just don't. You should not get hit in preseason football. He got hit a bunch. And the question coming out is going to be the question that's going to dog him until he proves that he can take these hits. Can he stay healthy? Right? They have Andy Dalton, who could obviously be serviceable in a pinch for Frank Reich if the doomsday scenario happens for Carolina. But he's going to have to get much quicker with the ball. He is not going to be able to do what he did at Alabama. He's not going to be able to sit there and wait for whomever he's throwing the ball to. I don't even know who their receivers are in Carolina right now.
Yeah, DJ Chark, Jonathan Mingo, who's a good player, Adam Thielen, who's battling a hamstring injury right now. But after that, it's some retreads.
Right. It's a bunch of guys that you definitely don't look like what he was throwing to in college for the last 3 years. He has a good back in Miles Sanders. I mean, if the offense tends to cater itself around that realm, but I just think this team's in for a long haul, man. It's a young quarterback. Yeah. He's still got to figure out the vagaries of the NFL, and their defense, as good as it's set up to be, is going to be without Brian Burns. Their best player on defense is holding in, and I didn't know that until this week. That Brian Burns is not going to play this likely not going to play this week. They have talent. They can win on defense with this team. But very similar to what you're saying about Frank Clark earlier, is this going to be the distraction that makes this defense not as productive as it possibly could be, which they need to be for a rookie quarterback?
No, they definitely do. It is going to be interesting to watch them because the opportunity in the NFC South is wide open. Who knows if it's actually going to come to fruition for the Carolina Panthers this year? Again, it might be one of those, it needs a year or two for Bryce Young to get right and prove that he can stay healthy and play as a smaller, maybe one of the smallest quarterbacks that we've seen in a long time.
He is the smallest, actually.
Is he really?
He might
be. I mean, he's 5'10", 5'11", maybe.
You saw him at the Super Bowl. He ain't that big, dude.
Nah, that's a good point. Yeah, he's got good hair, though.
Yeah,
that's all that matters. All right, as we close out, Ronde, give me a line that you like in one of these games in the NFL this weekend.
Yes, I was popping through some prop bets and some lines, and look, there's some good games this week. There's Philly at New England, plus 3.5. New England, San Francisco, Pitt, flying all the way across the country. Pitt is plus 2.5. San Francisco Sunday Night Football, your game, the game of the week. Everybody wants to see Dallas, New York Giants. Giants giving 3.5. But for me, I'm going to stay homer and in the South and go with two franchises that have question marks. Carolina at Atlanta. Atlanta is favored by 3.5. Now, look, both question marks for these franchises. The division is wide open, but this is a tone-setting type of game. We don't know what either team's going to be. Is Desmond Ridder the real deal? Good enough leader on offense for Atlanta in this nebulous style offense that Arthur Smith is going to run? And is Bryce Young the quarterback that people simultaneously do and do not believe in good enough to take Carolina where they want to go? So I think this is a fascinating game, whether the line holds up or not. I think there's so much uncertainty right now. 3.5 is a perfect line for Atlanta. So that's the one I'm looking at. What you got,
I like
bro?
that one. I like that one. The Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns, the two organizations founded by the same man, right? It feels like there's a rivalry that's just persisted, even though neither one have been good enough, long enough for it to be anything meaningful. Well, this year, they have two quarterbacks, in Joe Burrow and Deshaun Watson for the Cleveland Browns, who could light it up. Let's not forget that in his last full year, Deshaun Watson led the NFL in passing. 4,800 plus yards. He was unbelievable. If he can get himself right in Cleveland, then Cleveland might be, said this 2 weeks ago, Cleveland might be one of the surprise teams in the NFL this year. So as I look at this particular game, it's a hell of a one to open in the black and blue division, the AFC North. Cincinnati Bengals at the Cleveland Browns. The over-under is 47.5. I got to go over. I think this is going to be a high-scoring affair with both of these teams opening up their offenses with their two very elite quarterbacks, with all the negativity behind them. Now, the only caveat is Joe Burrow's calf. I think he's going to play, and even if he doesn't, he's going to be out there. He wants to be out there. This game's going to be a high-scoring affair. So 47.5 in the Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Ronde and Tiki on SuperBook Sports. Ronde, have a blessed weekend, brother. Hopefully I'll see you one of these days. Actually, you're going to be up in – are you going to be in Minnesota?
No, I'm not. I am going to Ohio.
Oh, well, I will see your team in Minnesota this weekend as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers take on the Minnesota Vikings. But I look forward to doing this again. Be good, brother. Thank you guys for tuning in to Ronde and Tiki on SuperBook Sports.
The Ronde and Tiki Podcast is produced by SuperBook Sports. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER in Colorado, Maryland, Nevada, New Jersey, Ohio, and Tennessee. In Iowa, call 1-800-BETS-OFF or visit 800betsoff.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342.